It seems that unimaginable, indescribable, and seemingly inexplicable suffering is embedded into the very mechanism by which, I'm told, God decided to create human beings.
This is the Oxford Union debate, which happened at the Oxford University. I was invited to speak there, and the argument of the debate was God is a delusion.
If the existence of God was genuinely reasonable, do you think we would have had thousands of years of debate on the same subject to no conclusion? Probably not.
Think of Scotland, the Czech Republic, South Korea, Japan, Uruguay, Norway, Scandinavia. These are societies where no one is out there trying to kill religion. It's just fading away.
I now understand that God is a delusion because there is a lack of a coherent definition of a God. I mean,
The people you are hearing argued that God is indeed a delusion, and I was invited to speak out there. I spoke from the Hindu perspective, a dharmic defense of God. And in this podcast, you will hear what I spoke about at the Oxford Union debate. How you see the world is often defined by where you come from. I'm a Hindu. Hinduism is almost certainly the most ancient living religion on earth. And Hinduism is a part of the dharmic group of religions, which also includes Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. In many ways, the way we approach life and how we look at the world is fundamentally different from the Abrahamic group of religions. The Abrahamic group, as you all know, is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A fundamental feature of the Abrahamic religions is the faith in one true male God, and that all other gods, and particularly goddesses, are false and should not be worshipped. Essentially, their belief can be summarized as, my truth is the truth, and your truth is false. Now, I'm not judging this. There are strengths and areas of improvements in every religion. Their faith in only one male God certainly gives Abrahamic religions much more internal cohesion. But the subject of this podcast is, how does this belief impact their relationship with science and therefore their view on God being a delusion? Now, the dharmic or the Hindu worldview is very different. How so? One of the key things is we don't see the world in a simple binary form like good, evil, true God and false God, black and white. We don't see the world that way. We see the world as God created it, in shades of grey. Or even better, in a vibrant myriad range of colors. We understand that the world is very complicated and that there is some good in the bad people, and even good people do some bad things at times. We see all gods as true. We don't judge someone else's God as false. And the thing to understand is that our perspective, whether dharmic or Abrahamic, defines the truth that we see. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain this by talking about the earth and the sun's movements. In the medieval era, the Christian church believed that the earth was flat and that the sun revolved around the earth. Do you know, even today, there are flat earthers who have offices around the globe. Any flat earthers here? Ancient Indians. And to be fair, even the ancient pagan Greeks and Egyptians knew that the earth revolved around the sun. Globe. Anyway, coming back. You've all been taught in your science class in school that the earth and other planets revolve around the sun. I'm sure that all of you believe this as the truth because we've all been told that science is the truth. Now, if you're only listening to this podcast, take a break and actually see the video being shown. Some things cannot be heard. They have to be seen. So this is how you think the planets revolve around the sun. But this is the truth only from one perspective. Because there is another perspective as well. the sun also revolves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and all the planets of our solar system keep chasing the sun as it revolves around the galaxy center. Now let me ask you again, what is the truth? The circular view of the solar system that you've learnt in school? Or this very weird, wiry shape that we just saw? A wise man would say that the truth you see depends on your perspective. And Hinduism understands this. It allows different perspectives on the truth. As has been written in the Rig Veda so beautifully, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. So from this open-minded Hindu perspective, how do we answer this so-called scientific question that God is a delusion? The question itself is incomplete, and that is because of the dharmic concept of Maya or illusion. Maya is a word that I'm sure all of you have heard of, but have you deeply thought about what it actually means? What is Maya? And what is the opposite of Maya? That is reality. The philosophy says that anything which is temporary is Maya or an illusion, and anything that is permanent is real. So basically, anything that is born and will die is an illusion, even if it will die after billions of years. And if something never dies, that is, it is amar, then it is real. Our souls are therefore real, but our bodies are an illusion. But there is another perspective on Maya. It says that even if something is temporary, you can say it is not Maya if it has a purpose. Therefore, even if something will die sometime in the future, if it has a purpose for now, then it is real for now. Let me explain this second perspective a bit more. Now, we've all heard of Carl Sagan, obviously, the great scientist, astronomer, and broadcaster. He notes in his book Cosmos, I am a collection of water, calcium, and organic molecules called Carl Sagan. You are a collection of almost identical molecules with a different collective label, just like my label is Amish. But is that all? Is there anything in here but molecules? What Carl Sagan said about the molecules that make up our body is a scientific fact. Now, if you pick an amount of water, calcium, and organic molecules of the right proportion and throw it under a bus, nothing will change. Nothing will happen to the bus or those materials. But even though our bodies are made up of that exact list of molecules, will we jump under a bus? I know I won't, because while in physical terms my body is made up of the elements that Carl Sagan listed, I also have something extra within me. Let's call that my soul. And my soul uses my body as a vehicle till its purpose in this life is complete. And that gives purpose to the elements that make up my body. That purpose makes my body real for now. And what happens with us can happen to God too. So can it be that if you find no purpose in God, then you don't see God as real? So the correct question perhaps is not whether God is a delusion. Maybe the correct question is that why do so many Westerners, and frankly many Westernized Indians as well, not feel the need for God anymore? Why does God not have a purpose in their lives? The answer lies perhaps in the difficult relationship that Abrahamic religions have with science, or more broadly, knowledge. Any scientific truth that is in conflict with the Abrahamic faith can be called blasphemy. So I simply want to have a scientific understanding and mindset. Will I believe in God? Would I be able to accept the one true male God if he is in conflict with science and knowledge? I'm sure you've all heard of Galileo, right? Who was punished by the Christian church for saying that the earth revolved around the sun. The church at that time believed instead that the sun revolved around the earth and that the earth was flat. Scientifically speaking, the Christian church was wrong. So Galileo was punished essentially for speaking a scientific fact. यार, हमने तो बचपन में सुना था झूठ बोले कौवा काटे. गलीलियो के साथ तो उल्टा हुआ, सच बोले तो कौवा काटे. We are all aware of the word blasphemy, right? For the Abrahamic religions, if science was in conflict with religious dogma, then they didn't change their religious dogma. They would much rather shut down the science. And they did that through the concept of blasphemy. Blasphemy is when you contradict God or anything God may have said through the scriptures. In the medieval era, many Christian kingdoms or nations punished the crime of blasphemy with death. Some Islamic countries, even in the modern day, punish blasphemy with death. Example, Pakistan, our western neighbor. Famous author Salman Rushdie, as we all know, suffered life-threatening injuries for a book which was considered to be blasphemy. And that sets up that magnificent duel, right? Abrahamic religions and their God on one side and science on the other. For the Abrahamic God needed compliance and absolute faith, while science needs fearless questioning. And that's why you'll notice that usually in Abrahamic countries, if science is strong, then their religion becomes weak, like in many Western countries where their strong scientific spirit has led to the weakening of Christian beliefs among the people. On the other hand, if their religion is strong, then their scientific achievements are weak, like in many Islamic countries such as Pakistan. Net, evidence seems to suggest that very often in Abrahamic religions, particularly in Christianity and Islam, you can either have God or science. You cannot have both. Now, how does Hinduism see this debate? In Hinduism, the concept of blasphemy, the way it is in Abrahamic religions, does not even exist. Our scriptures do not tell us to shut down questioning. In Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism, there is no belief that there is only one truth and that it is absolute, and anything else has to be responded to with what is called cancel culture these days. And there is certainly no question of killing or punishing so-called blasphemers. Simply put, the principle is that words should be replied to with words, and only violence can be replied to with violence. In the dharmic way, you cannot use violence to respond to words. That is considered wrong. Therefore, if a scientific truth is in conflict with some religious dogma, Hindus are willing to allow both to exist. Neither of them have to be shut down. They can continue debating. Net, there is no scientific truth that I have to deny to prove that I'm a good Hindu. So scientific temper can coexist along with Hindu beliefs in gods and goddesses. There is no contradiction. But even more importantly, Hinduism has a different relationship with knowledge. Let me explain that by taking you to the book of Genesis in the Holy Bible. I'm sure all of you have heard of this. And for those who haven't, very quickly, the story is as follows. The Abrahamic God created the first man, Adam, and the first woman, Eve. He then placed them in an idyllic place called the Garden of Eden, where they had no trouble, enough food, a relaxed life, basically perfect land, a chilled out life. But they were told to never eat the fruit of a particular tree. That was an apple tree. And, as can be predicted, we all know how human beings are, right? So it can be predicted. Adam and Eve obviously did eat that apple. What was forbidden to them? The forbidden fruit, they ate it. Now God punished Adam and Eve for that, and they were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Now, those of you who may have read the story attentively, you may have noticed that the name of the tree that bore the apple fruit that was not to be eaten, right? Some of you may know this already. Those who don't, that tree was called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Most Abrahamic religious scholars say that good and evil was actually a metaphor for everything. So therefore, essentially, Adam and Eve were punished because they ate an apple from the tree of the knowledge of everything. Can you think about that? Basically, Gyan se dur raho. Now, I'm not saying that this philosophy was wrong. Knowledge, if you're not prepared for it, is often a path to unhappiness and destruction. And it can be argued that you see a lot of evidence of this in our troubled modern world. So, if your purpose is primarily to just be happy, to be joyful, then maybe it's a good idea to avoid knowledge. Innocence is bliss. It's a fair decision. Just remain innocent, remain happy, remain in the Garden of Eden. How does Hinduism see this relationship with knowledge. Hindu philosophy acknowledges the risks of knowledge. Great knowledge in the hands of the wrong person can lead to war and destruction. Hinduism acknowledges this. Examples of this can be seen in our ancient texts, the most well-known one obviously being Ravan, the primary antagonist in the epic Ramayana. He was a very knowledgeable guy, no doubt about it, but we all know what all crimes he did. But despite the risks of knowledge, Hindu, Buddhist and Jain philosophy still encourage us to go ahead and acquire knowledge. To put it in terms that you may understand, Hindus wouldn't be told by our gods that don't eat that apple. In fact, we would be told, go for that entire freaking tree. But we would also be told that before you go for that apple tree, prepare yourself so that you can handle that knowledge. As an interesting sidelight, those of you who have an Apple phone, okay, just take a break and look at the logo. It is an apple that has been bitten into. Or the story of Newton, the one who discovered the concept of gravity in the West. That is also connected to an apple falling from the tree on his head. It's very interesting, right? The symbolism of an apple with knowledge in the West. I mean, I guess it comes from the book of Genesis. Anyway, coming back, Hinduism does not have a tortured relationship with knowledge. The Hindu gods and goddesses don't punish you for seeking knowledge. They punish you only if you do bad deeds with that knowledge, like Ravan did. And that is essentially the concept of karma and dharma. Learn, evolve so that you can handle that knowledge and then learn some more. And keep learning till you learn everything that there is to learn, till you have consumed that entire tree of knowledge. For then you become God, because you attain moksha or nirvana. That is one of the ways of looking at the concept of moksha or nirvana. Now, from this philosophical framework, what is the purpose of God? Should God's purpose be to punish you because you've learnt more than you were supposed to? Or should God act like a strict father who keeps you in line for your own happiness? Remain innocent, you'll be happy. No. In the dharmic way, in the Hindu way, God is actually like a witness or a guide who guides you on how to acquire knowledge without messing up your own life. In the dharmic way, there is no conflict between God and knowledge, between spirituality and science. And that's why you'll find that it's very, very common in India to be religious and scientific at the same time. Just like the Indian Space Research Organization, the ISRO scientists who sent a probe to the moon. I'm sure many of you have seen pictures of the ISRO scientists as they took the components and the model of that rocket to a temple to pray to it before launch. The ISRO scientists clearly saw no contradiction in what they did, because they are not in conflict with their religion. This attitude applies not just to the dharmic religions, but to Indians as a whole. Indian Muslims and Christians find no conflict between their religion and science. Even the late Dr. Abdul Kalam, who was one of India's finest scientists, was a deeply religious man. Where else would one witness such a beautiful relationship between science and God, except in India, our very own India? God and science in one frame, right? Like we see in this book. So, this was my argument against the subject that God is a delusion. I was honored to speak there at the Oxford Union debate in the Oxford University. I spoke from the Hindu perspective. Aur Bhagwan hamare saath the. Our side actually won the debate. Okay, in Oxford University, where I'm sure you're aware, most of the students would not be the believer types. But we actually won the debate. And that brings us to the end of this episode. But before you leave, here's a recording of my concluding lines from my speech at the Oxford Union debate.
Everyone knows what this gesture is? Yeah, it's Namaste. Most Westerners erroneously translate Namaste to mean hello. That's not the actual meaning. In Sanskrit, Namaste means I bow to the divine within you. Now, this is a statement of humility. I'm bowing. But it's also a challenge to you. Discover the divine within you. That is the challenge that Hinduism puts up.
Many great souls like Gautam Buddha, Mahavir and Adi Shankaracharya walked the path of knowledge and evolved to become divine. God is not a delusion because you are God. We all have the divine within us. We are all potential gods. We just don't know it yet. And once you discover the calmness of the divine within of the Buddha that lives within all of us, you will find that you can handle any knowledge without losing your religion. Leave comments below on what God means to you, and namaste once again. So this was the Immortal India podcast with me, Amish. If you like this episode, like and share it, please. And if you want to receive the notification for the next episode, click subscribe on this link. This podcast is supported by the Dilip Piramal Foundation. The Dilip Piramal Foundation is an initiative by renowned industrialist Dilip Piramal to support dharmic causes across India and the world. In this aim, the foundation has supported art galleries, documentaries, dharamshalas, education, and many other such initiatives.